Las Vegas?
Vegas? What the hell are we doing in Vegas?
What's up, everybody? Andrew Clear here from the F1 podcast, bringing you season 3, episode 30, with my lovely co-host, Jonathan Ricci. John, how are you doing?
Andrew, it's good to be back on. Good to see you. We had a great time celebrating you and Brett last weekend, I believe it was. So I made the trip down to London. I'm feeling good. I mean, I'm going to the Canada-Jamaica game tonight, and it is pouring rain outside. So,
Truthfully, it's more fun to play in that type of weather where it's wet and cold rather than watch, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's go with that. That's fair.
I don't know. Fair. Like, doesn't anything just jazz you up more when you're playing footy out and, in like a competitive match, and it's like that it's a battle tested element with regards to the weather. But so we have a 2-parter this week. So first episode will be with me and John. Next episode will be taping on Friday. Will be with me and Erica. The reason we're doing this double episode is because
there is so much to talk about.
Well, F1 was in Vegas this past week, John.
Viva Las Vegas!
And from antics to the race, there was just it was an absolute, just chaos ensued every day, starting from when they got there on Wednesday to when the black and white checker flag came out on Sunday morning at 2:00 Eastern.
Let's get into it because there is a lot to talk about. For starters, to prep me for this week's episode, I actually went back and listened to our episode when they announced the Las Vegas Grand Prix, and then they had that whole big ceremony. I think it was in front of the Bellagio or Caesar's Palace, one of the two hotels, and just the amount of what they wanted to bring there and the goal and everything, the excitement, the ramping up, the ticket sales, the hotels, everything was, when they announced this, Andrew, the excitement was so huge. And don't get me wrong, we were a little excited, but we did have some questions. We generally did have some questions. Leading into the weekend, there was a lot of concerns. And I mean, ticket prices, we talked about it last week. We talked about hotel prices dropping dramatically. Something about a stat that I read online, I think in our notes here, that still up to 10,000 tickets were still available. And they were offering a $5 million ticket excursion. Just so you had that spectacle on the Wednesday with all the cars going up to the conveyor belt. Or something, I don't know what you call it, some kind of Hunger Games kind of feel, if you're going to be very honest with you.
I believe Max Verstappen called it a clown show.
Clown show, but I think this is the quote of the weekend. It's a 99% show and 1% sporting event leading into Saturday's race. Think about this. You had all this expectation, all this excitement going, or controversy, everything. And then you get into the first practice. Keep in mind, this track looks like an upside down pig, and I don't know if you ever watched the Simpsons.
Legit, it's a Simpsons flying pig.
So did the Simpsons design this track?
I don't know.
Did they actually call this out?
It's one of those Simpsons moments again that they predict the future.
So I guess I kind of go into, so you have all this excitement going into the first free practice. It was held, I think it was 20:30 local time. So what would have that been? 11 o'clock, I think.
20:30 local time would have been 8:30.
8:30. Within 9 minutes, the Carlos Sainz stopped on track. They were hitting a loose metal cover on the track surface. So I guess it was, I don't know exactly what it was. Was it
it was a manhole,
basically? Yeah.
That they didn't properly put down at all.
So the session gets immediately red flagged, and then you have basically it's red flagged, and then there's a couple hours delay, and then second free practice was meant to be scheduled for 12 o'clock. Then it was extended to 90 minutes and delayed. So basically it was delayed 2.5 hours because they were working on all these changes. And then the next thing you know, you see fans, a public announcement 1:30 a.m. local time had the fans get kicked out of the city. So imagine spending thousands of dollars on a hospitality suite, and then it's oh, by the way, at 2 a.m. you have to go, and it's out of your control.
Well, I feel bad for the fans that bought it, who drove 8-10 hours to buy like a ticket for the Friday, and they only got to see 9 minutes of racing, hang around until 1:30 and then basically get told to F off. And that is like, as from your experience, right, going to Canadian Grand Prix, I can't speak from it, but from what I've gathered, is that it's a cheaper ticket on the Friday, right? Because it's just the free practice sessions. And it's kind of an opportunity for those who can't afford the full weekend to attend and see, enjoy the race, right? To a certain extent. These moments happen where it's unexpected. However, what's the problem of them staying till 2:00 in the morning and watching? Vegas never sleeps. These fans are excited to come. And just the fact that you just said, no, screw it to the fans because we want to, we just need the session to go under, and they're worried about other health and safety issues, I guess. Doesn't understand why didn't they address though that in the 2.5 hour delay? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, this kind of gave me like the US 2005 controversy all over again, where half the teams like ended up protesting on the tires. You remember in Indianapolis, if I remember that. But like now they have like a full-on lawsuit. Fans are suing Formula One, being forced to leave. And so I guess I'm trying to understand the rationale between F1 and F1. And don't worry, we're gonna get to Carlos Sainz in a bit, but just to think about that is, I wonder if because at 2 a.m. maybe the liquor law, I don't know what Las Vegas Clark County's liquor license is. So at 2 a.m. it's completely cut off. And then I guess they didn't really pay their staff for potential overtime that could happen. So then they're just like, screw it, let's just get everybody out. I don't know. We saw a lot of comments online. We had some colleagues and friends there. I don't know. It was just a big kind of disappointment starting the weekend.
Yeah, and I mean, if it's the case where they didn't want to pay overtime to the staff, that's just incredibly lazy, and you're going to be making your money back anyway from this weekend, considering the spectacle that it was.
Yeah.
So even if the race doesn't operate at the margin that you want to, I think saving face for the fans is a more important case in the long term than it would be from a financial perspective, short-term wise. And like seeing Liberty Media's financials, they're not hurting for money anyways at the end of the day to go with it. But yeah, so especially this manhole cover, can we not just talk about how, thank God for F1 safety, because Carlos could have really been injured in that manhole issue where apparently he even lost feeling in his legs for a couple seconds because of how the manhole got caught under the car and basically ripped like 67% of the entire car to shreds. Like he had to go whole new engine unit. The monocoque was screwed. Even like the chassis was just torn underneath. And they had pictures of the debris and it was just insane. But thankfully, due to new safety regulations, all these sensors, the engine shut down within 800 milliseconds of the event occurring, right? Which is just incredible.
So now that his car is completely totaled, and
not to his own fault, of course, either.
Not to his own fault. And Andrew, like think about this. They get hit with a 10-second penalty or 10-second grid penalty because of it. The fact that I vented my frustration on Twitter. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is not Carlos Sainz's fault. I get it if it is a viable issue. And like, I think the whole community, except for maybe one team, was in complete agreement. So like, and Fred Vasseur, I don't know if you watched the team principals things. Like, if he just went off, and it just like, I don't understand. Like the reporter, I forget what the name of the reporter is. He tried to ask
Tom Clarkson.
Tom Clarkson. He tried to ask him, like, Fred's like, oh, like, can you at least talk about this? Can you at least like, whatever? And Fred's like, what do you want me to say? Like, I just like like the FIA basically screwed, without me swearing, basically screwed us in 2 races ago in a very competitive constructors title right now. Like, what do you want to say? And then even like kudos to Toto Wolff. He's like, Toto was like, you probably should stop talking to Fred right now. Like, or more fines are probably going to get issued to Fred Vasseur. But yeah, I just completely was wild. And it was just kind of like a slap in the face. And like now, luckily he was able to drive his car on Sunday, but starting him, was it P12 that he started on Saturday's race? Like, I don't know. That's just like a complete slap in the face.
Carlos has to be probably one of the most unluckiest drivers this year slash one of the most like unnecessarily penalized drivers this year too. Like if we all go all the way back to Australia and how we ended up getting a 5-second penalty while under the safety car finish, and everyone just rushed to the line where he was going to finish like P3, P4, and ended up finishing in P12 out of the points because of that crash in the third red flag, screwed over by the FIA there. And then again, having this thing where regulations are regulations. Well, there's also a thing called common sense, people, and that needs to be adhered to as well when it comes to these decisions. And, kudos to the teams. Everyone said, kudos to, the majority of the teams where they said they're going to protest and be like, this just isn't right. It's not the Carlos's fault that he now has to take a 10-second 10-place grid penalty. But of course, the one team that didn't, what rumor has is the one team that didn't approve on this protest is the team that they're fighting for in the Constructors' Championship for P2, and that was Mercedes. And you could even tell, like in the press conference too, Toto was kind of, trying to brush it by. And Fred was like, Toto, if you were in my position, you'd be equally pissed off, if not even more upset. And to be fair, it's a fair case, because even Max said the same thing about Toto's comments with regards to Sainz's car after that kind of freak accident. He goes, it's different when you're put in that position, and you need to be a little empathetic in that case. And 9 teams, eight other teams were, 1 team wasn't.
Especially with everything that went on like afterwards, after FP1, Andrew, and then fans getting like not really a sorry letter, but like a $200 gift shop voucher, which I don't even, that is like, you can even get like Formula One like clothing with that. I think that's maybe just related to like Las Vegas Grand Prix like clothes too. Right. The whole, it was probably the most embarrassing moment for the FIA or Formula One this year, I believe. Like, this is going to go down like that practice session is going to go down as probably like a big restart, which is probably like they're all going to have I think they're already having consultations after the Formula One, after like American Thanksgiving, to talk about next year and what like Las Vegas needs to do and Formula One needs to do to make that circuit much better. Because I don't know if you hear this, but like even a lot of YouTubers were even talking about like leading into that weekend, as just so much, the locals were just so furious with like everything going on in terms of traffic. And then now it's going to take 6 weeks to get everything done. So
it's typical construction too, right? They kind of wait everything. And then when push comes to shove and they now get shoved with an important timeline, it's just kind of all gears go, and it's not put well together. And we'll probably talk about this more on Friday about how structurally unsound the overall grandstands were, and whatnot. But kind of leading into then I guess it was a Friday or Saturday. It was a midnight qualification, right? Like, how nuts is that? Midnight Pacific time, or not Pacific time, but anyways. So with that said, though, Ferrari looking great and fast, in the qualifying, with Charles Leclerc getting another pole position on the season. And it was kind of like a matter of, well, could he convert or not? And I think he may have been able to, if Carlos was able to start in P2 as opposed to P12 to defend off Max. But I'm just curious your thoughts on that on that qualifying session.
I think, it was a really good qualifying. Like, clearly, like Ferrari, I don't know about you, but we've kind of just been noticing it. I don't know if it's Leclerc that's been slowly just picking up lately for the team, or just bagging some points where we've needed. From Qatar, it's been 5th, disqualification, 3rd, did not start, and a 2 finish for his race, this thing. But like, I don't know, this is a wild ending, like resurgence from the team, and it's going to make like the ending like even more exciting. Do you want to go
The track temperature at the time of the 10 o'clock start was the same temperature as the ambient temperature, and you never see that. You rarely ever see that in racing. Like, it's a very unheard case, and that made turn 1 on the first lap a skating rink.
Well, how many teams went like around the corner and off the grid completely?
Well, let's even backtrack to start. before the race, when they were doing, the driver's parade in those classic cars, 3 of the cars broke down due to oil leaks. And it was all on the left side of the track. So that's why they had to throw this like dirt, like this oil sand out there to kind of
It was like white sand or something.
But like just to think it could go from bad to worse in the weekend.
Or even better, Andrew, is when they introduced Sergio Perez, and then like Sergio had no
Bruce
idea where
Buffer,
to go.
what a legend. Just yelling at his face, and Sergio had no clue what to do.
He looked like a lost space cadet. He's like, I'm sorry, where am I supposed
he's like,
to
do I go and shake your hand? Like kind of Ricky Bobby to be like, I don't know what to do with my hands, Verstappen goes into the first turn, semi alongside Leclerc, not really alongside Leclerc, and just kind of like due to no one could stop, just shoved them way off the road. They both go, and it took 7 or 8 laps for Verstappen to, get a 5-second penalty, which really, did make a difference at the time. But almost, Ricci, do you think that kind of penalty should be harsher? Should it be like a 10 or a 15-second penalty for kind of blatantly, or, putting all 4, forcing a guy off when all 4 wheels go off in that case? Because for Verstappen, it really didn't make much of a difference at the end of the day. Or if you got handed, like, say, a 10-second penalty, that could have changed the face of the race quite a bit.
Well, I think the interesting part there, Andrew, is more that if Leclerc ended up crashing because of it, or if there was if he touched him, then I can probably see like, okay, then instead of a 5-second, then it becomes a 10 or 15 seconds. You're gonna have to remind me. I think it was the 2021 British Grand Prix where Verstappen touched Lewis Hamilton touched Verstappen, and Verstappen went out, and I think it was a 10-second penalty, and Lewis Hamilton came back and I think won the race.
And like those should be like 25-second penalties in my opinion. Like forcing another driver like out and out, like off and out of the race, like that should be so severe. But
and you get to see the frustration in Leclerc's voice. Like, I mean, and we haven't even talked about what happened behind the other drivers, but I mean, he kept telling us, he's like, why is he not like? He's got to give me the spot. He's got to give me the spot. And I think in the benefit of the doubt, like even he gave him the spot or what we did see, like between him, Verstappen, and then Perez towards the end, we saw some pretty remarkable racing to the end. And and like, I think this would have been Leclerc's race to win. And it literally looked like it, especially when the penalty got hit. But then I think that second safety car, I think it was Lando Norris that went out, or it wasn't Lando Norris's car. I don't know when the second safety car came in, had to come out, but that was the reason why I think Leclerc even admitted that he's like, I could have won this race without that second one.
And thank God the racing made up for all of the pre-game antics, quote unquote, from Wednesday to Saturday. It was just an absolute nightmare. But those, hour and a half on, 50 laps really made up for everything, because we saw some incredible overtaking into into the straights, even into the final
lap.
My
goodness.
Plenty of overtakes on the Las Vegas Strip, which was quite neat. A lot of overtakes into the chicane at the end of the straight, or into the strip, as well as the first turn going into the strip. It was,
I think somebody mentioned, sorry to interrupt you. I think someone mentioned this is one of the top. Oh, that makes total sense. Lap 27 is when the second safety car came out. But I think this was one of the most overtaken races of the season.
I think, don't quote me on this, but I think this was the most overtakes in a race in a dry race since China 2016. There was just an incredible amount of overtaking going on, which saw like some really interesting fluctuations in how it
99 complete overtakes.
Wow, that's incredible. And what that led to was you saw like Alpine, like Esteban Ocon started from P16, goes all the way to P4. They were so quick this week, and they were able to perfect the safety car strategy to perfection, I think. And that's what really was able to get him to that P4 position.
Not only that, he's also helped me become number 1 in our fantasy. Just saying.
By 5 points. And mind you, 2 weeks in a row, I forgot to set my lineup just to try and make it interesting for you. I didn't want to beat you guys by like 900 points going into the final 2 weeks. So you're welcome for that. Anyway, it also saw a guy like Lance Stroll who was able to navigate the initial crashes going into turn one, go from P19 all the way to P5. And what a race he had today, and what some form he's been kind of picked up as of late, which has been great to see.
Yeah, I think it's good to definitely see the Canadian come. That's back-to-back fifth place finishes. Even though that there was like Lando, thank goodness he's okay. Like he had a major crash on the straight, and I don't know about you, but like, what was your take on Mercedes' strategy throughout the weekend? Or I guess they just couldn't manage the tires and realistically the strategy behind the weekend in terms of pit stops.
Well, I think two major collisions kind of hurt them this weekend. George, colliding with Max while Max was fighting through the field after he was kind of in the middle of the race, P7, and was fighting through the field. And just Russell, I don't know if he didn't see him. He just turned right in on him, right? And then, Verstappen end plate goes. There's some debris off of Russell's car that goes. So he has to kind of come in, check the car's okay, pits, and he gets a 5-second penalty for it. He was able to fight through the field, even getting up to P4, across the line. But while the penalty was applied, it drops back down to P8. Hamilton early on, and that created the second safety car, was just kind of a collision with Piastri where, it don't really think like both were committed to the turn. They were kind of like waiting for someone to make the first move, so to speak. And then they kind of made the same move at the same time and collided. Both had punctures. So, both had Hamilton had to go into the pits, get new tires, but he was able to get back up into P7. So I think, what really helped Ferrari this weekend, maybe it was a little bit of karma on Mercedes side, is that two major kind of incidents cost them their positioning against.
And also Total Wolff didn't let them go to the casino. I don't know if you read that statistic. He said no one's allowed to go gambling for the weekend.
Would you want to work for a boss who makes you have like little to no fun?
Well, I think you shouldn't the fun be on like the Tuesday, Wednesday, like because I remember even in Montreal, a lot of the drivers and their teams would go out for like longer dinners. I think it was the Tuesday, Wednesday, and like because everything would kind of get started on the Friday.
Well, what they should have done is they should have made Abu Dhabi next weekend. Not this weekend coming up, not and on a doubleheader. Like it give these teams like some time to kind of recuperate after what a Vegas party would be like, because that's why they're there too, right? They got to enjoy some fun, blossom steam, and then be able to do all their like end of year banquets, end of year sponsorship dinners and appearances and whatnot. So that was the case. But with that being said, Ferrari have now jumped up into the constructor standing in terms of being only 4 points behind Mercedes for the weekend.
Yeah,
and luckily, and crazy enough too, Aston Martin has somewhat been able to pull it back against McLaren due to Lando's crash. We were able to gain 10 points on this weekend. They'd only be 11 points back for them for P4 going into Abu Dhabi. And not that saying that that's going to happen where they're going to be able to finish P4, but at least there's some vested interest going into the final race of the season.
Well, there's a couple of things that we need to pay attention. Not only that in the constructors, but then you have actually before we I just really wanted to raise this. Can we just talk about during the race, both the Alpines battling between each other?
Oh, and Ocon, what a sick move that was.
Oh, and then all their major sponsors were there too. Like, can you imagine if there was a collision?
It would have been the first time that Ocon would have been involved with a kerfuffle with his teammate.
And I don't really know. I don't think they really like each other.
That's fair. Before we go to construction, some other things that stood out for me was that battle between Charles and Checo at the end. With Charles having the sweet move going into the chicane there and kind of, took him over on the straight out, kind of waited for the braking and then was able to defend going into the, the final turn, which was great. But tough weekend for Williams, who qualified really well, but just couldn't maintain their tires enough during the race, and they ended up finishing P12 and P16.
I think just a couple of things on that. I think one thing for next year, I think Perez needs to worry about, because this is not the first time where he's lost a podium position on the last lap.
That's back-to-back races.
Yeah, it's back-to-back races. So I think people in the camp need to figure out why he is struggling towards the end, or like he needs to work on his defense there, because as you mentioned, like luckily he's secured second place already. And this is the first time since 20, I think it's the first time in history Red Bull Racing has their first ever 1-2 in the drivers' championship.
Yeah.
It could, because now with like Lewis finishing seventh, he's mathematically secured his third place in the drivers. But I'll be interested to see, kind of talk about Abu Dhabi, is the positions 4 to 7 in the drivers, constructors. You have Fernando Alonso, you have Leclerc, you have Carlos, and I think you have Lando. It's still a fair game going into the last race.
Yeah, I think 4 through 7 is only covered off by like 10 points at most. It's going to make for a great Abu Dhabi. But John, before we end the podcast episode, I just want you to get your overall final thoughts on Vegas. And are you excited really to watch this race year after year until 2030? When the
I think there needs to be a lot to address. I think clearly there were some issues this year, and it's full stop. We could see it, and it's interesting because even if you saw the end of the end of the drivers, like the podium interviews that they had, I don't know if it was David Coulthard. He just kept like trying to ask the drivers, like, "Are you excited about this weekend? What's your overall thoughts about like?" It felt like it just kept rinsing and repeating, like, oh, can the drivers keep talking about how great of a race this was and how great of a weekend this was? And I kind of just felt like some of the commentary from the reporters and stuff just kept trying to, like, towards the end, just saying, like, oh, we're so excited about today. We're so excited about this. But trying to brush away what happened on Friday. So I'm curious to see what Clark County, the FIA, Formula One, and a number of other industry partners, MGM, I guess Caesars Entertainment. There's got to be a lot of a bigger conversation of how to make this weekend continue to success, in like whether it has to do with pricing, whether it has to do with like road closures. Like clearly a lot of people were venting up street. Like literally, for goodness sake, we watch people do laps on an escalator just to catch like a glimpse of a race.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to pay like $2,000 for a ticket.
It's always tough to run it perfectly the first time. In that sense, but there's an opportunity to learn from a lot of mistakes. And I agree with you, Ricci. I hope that they understand what those mistakes were and how to rectify some of these issues moving forward. The racing quality for that race is there, as shown on Sunday. It can be an incredible race. It's everything leading up to it that needs to be either toned down a bit or perfected.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what kind of the consultations and what kind of the next steps are going to be after the American Thanksgiving, as I said earlier. But look, if we can get great racing on that Sunday again, that's amazing. Maybe they need to push back the start time, because maybe like we had one driver say that he did 4 naps leading up to practice.
And you're affecting these guys' body clock and expect them to then hop on a flight to Abu Dhabi, which is like long enough as it is, massive time zone change, and then you're going to expect them to race within the next 5 days. So, as mentioned, quite interesting. But thanks, John. Thank you so much for love your thoughts. Everybody, this has been season 3, episode 30 of the F1 podcast. On Friday, Eric and I are going to discuss her thoughts about the race, as well as some fan reactions that we had provided over Instagram this past weekend about the race and its overall structure. And we'll give a little bit of preview of Abu Dhabi as well. But I usually do this part, but we're going to change this up. John, why don't you take it away for the ending of the episode?
Drew, I appreciate that, and I'm going to try this out. I don't know if I'll be as good as you, but I'll do my best. So thank you so much for supporting the F1 podcast as we head into the last race of the season next weekend in Abu Dhabi. Just want to say, make sure to keep supporting us on social media. We are on Instagram, TikTok, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. I just want to let everybody know we're at 674 followers on Instagram. Big shout out to Trinity Comment, as always, for a great spot to watch Formula One races in Toronto. And looking forward to your Erica's thoughts and both of you guys comments on Friday. And we got the last race of the weekend. Let's finish strong. We're gonna have a great battle into the drivers and potentially the constructors championship for different positions other than first. So let's kind of see it, and maybe hopefully can Ferrari win another race. That'd be awesome. But I mean, looking at that map, a lot of times Red Bulls win. So anyways, we'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for your support, and we'll see you in next week's or Friday's episode of the F1 podcast. Take care and have a great day.